Mm.
Right.
I wanted to ask you something because I've I've posted about this before, and whenever you make this comparison, some people lose their minds, but the comparisons are becoming more and more clear to more people now, and that's the comparisons and the similarities and the structures and the way things are implemented between Trump and Hitler. And the reason why I'm saying this as far as the rounding up of a group of people, the way that it didn't start off with that. It first started off with saying that these people are keeping you down and you're in the situation that you are in because of them. And they were going to control the media and only certain image. Like it's like following the Hitler Nazi pattern, like playbook. Um, is that something you would agree with, or am I way off in my interpretation when I keep saying this?
I think there are parallels, but I'll be honest with you. One thing, and this is like, I'm not saying it's the right thing to do, but it's something that I've sort of like adopted as, kind of like a compass in the way I sort of like construct my messaging. Is I don't like making these emphatic comparisons because oftentimes they can be distractive or destructive. So, for instance, I see a lot of comparisons with what's happening in Gaza with the Holocaust. I don't like it, right? I think that part of the reason I don't like it is it's going to turn a large segment of people off. It's going to lead to sort of like a comparison that I don't think is constructive. And I think that the issue in and of itself as a standalone issue is enough to merit attention and to merit alarm. Same thing with making those comparisons to Hitler. And I can see the utility of it, Etan, because everybody knows who Hitler is. He's a massive cautionary tale. It's gonna sort of like function as a car accident, like a car accident would, and pull a lot of people in to want to focus in. But there's a great book by he's a New York-based academic by the name of Jason Stanley. The book is called Erasing History. I think it's one of the most important books written in the last several years. And he makes the case that Trump is trying to construct an authoritarian government by way of the barrage of executive orders he's enacting and the strident policies and programs that he's implemented. I would rather that we sort of like make the case that he's basically assembling an authoritarian regime without drawing those comparisons. But again, I don't think you're wrong. It's just not something I feel comfortable doing.
Yeah, and it makes sense because it also then turns into an argument about the appropriateness, let's have a full debate about Nazism and what it meant, and is this similar, and what is settler colonialism anyway when it emerges from a Holocaust, and how is that different from what the U.S. did? And before you know, we just had a 3-hour conversation and there's still a genocide going on.
Yeah,
so it becomes a bit of a redirect that becomes really painful. But some of the questions at hand.
But let me,
I'm sorry, Etan, go ahead.
Let me just interject real quick in what you're saying. In the thought of when people, and I talk about mainstream America, when they are looking at, as far as the coverage of what you just explained, Khaled, as far as the dehumanization of Palestinians. So when they hear 1,000 Palestinians have been killed, it doesn't quite register. Yeah. But then if you say, well, 1,000 white people have been killed, or look at what Hitler did, and this is something as comparison, do you see the similarities? It's almost like a way to say, you remember in the time he killed when he told everybody to close their eyes and imagine, Matthew kind of said all this, now imagine that she's white. So then when you imagine a white person, then you're like, oh wow, that is terrible. And it's an unfortunate reality because it shouldn't be like that. But sometimes what I have experienced is that relating something to what happened in the Holocaust, relating something to what Hitler did, is the only way they can make a draw a parallel to say, oh, they're human beings. You mean like they were human beings? And it's an unfortunate reality, but that's really what I've seen happen quite often.
It is, but it's also, to be frank with you, it's also ahistoric. And it sort of like draws in the complexity of race and racialization, because even though we might understand Ashkenazi Jewish identity in terms of whiteness today, that wasn't the case in the 40s, right? There's a long history in the United States, especially, right, where Jewish identity was racialized as non-white. And a big part of the genocidal Nazi project was to sell the idea that Jews were non-white as a consequence of the religion. So for me, I think I definitely see the sort of like optical and like messaging value that you're trying to draw. But I like to be very careful with these things. And I think especially now, like this, it also draws in and invites in the conversation around white supremacy and the fact that white supremacy is not monolithic. Trump is aligned with a version of white supremacy that is driven by, white Catholic nationalist sort of leanings. That also has that same leaning, that has that same perspective on Jewish identity, that they are not bona fide whites as a consequence of the religious identity. So, again, being that I'm an academic, man, I like to swim in the complexity and the gray. And I try to keep my messaging as sort of like true to what it is I feel comfortable publishing in a law review article or an op-ed. And I'm uncomfortable with those arguments for a range of reasons.
Before I have a question, I want to throw a wrinkle in here because, like Dave, I'm Jewish. So I'm going to use my Jewish privilege because if you or Etan says something, they're going to call you anti-Semitic. They're going to say I'm a self-hating Jew. I'm going to take self-hating Jew over anti-Semitic any day of the week. And I do use the Holocaust. And it goes back to, at different times, is that when you were talking earlier about demeaning people, and when I see Yoav Gallant in the second day say, these are human animals, and we will treat them as such. And then it confesses to war crimes about starving and no water and no food. And here, human animals. Well, I know in the Holocaust, Joseph Goebbels and Hitler and everyone, they said we were lice, we were rats, we were vermin. That was the language used to Jews to justify the Holocaust. So when I see a very specific parallel, I'm going to exercise my Jewish privilege and call that out and say it. So I have some a little more nuance. I believe there's space, but it can almost come from Jewish people in a way that will be received different otherwise. That said, you know what? That said, I forgot my question, so just roll with it.
No, I think if I can just jump on that real quick, like, communities who belong to racial or religious groups will sometimes use the tools that are provided by, imperial powers, right? Who was it like Audre Lorde said something along the lines of, using the master's tools will not, be productive for a marginalized group. But we see marginalized groups do that all the time. Not only the Israeli government, and that is war on terror language, right? Netanyahu, Gallant, Ben-Gvir, all these guys were very intentional about adopting basically the war on terror legal and lexiconic playbook to carry forward their project and sort of likening what took place on October 7th with 9/11. But it goes well beyond that, right? Because Native Americans, we all know, were characterized and animalized as savages, barbarians. Enslaved Africans were animalized and objectified as beasts. So this language of animalizing a group that you subsequently want to target and then genocide is, ethnic cleansing, racism 101. And sadly, groups like Jews, presiding over the government in Israel will adopt that playbook if it's useful in their political project.
No, absolutely. Let's take it to
wait,
the
wait,
legal.
one more thing, Dave. Let me just tell one quick part with this. And I do respect that completely, and I understand it. Some people aren't as learned as you are to know the complexities of what that actually means. So they look at it in terms of who they see in Israel right now, and that's who they identify. So the right now is somebody with a pale skin that they associate with white. And so the level of empathy completely changes. And it's even in the language. So I remember in college, let me tell a quick story. I remember in college, there's a coach. I'm not gonna say his name, but he was an assistant coach. And we were out there swimming in Puerto Rico. And he said, hey, made a joke, hey, I thought black people couldn't swim. And I never heard it. And I was like, well, what does that mean? I don't understand. And then a teammate, Eric Williams, he said, oh, you mean it because we would have swam off the boat? And then they started laughing. And I was like, is that what you meant? And I just kind of looked at him and stared for a while. And I was like, well, what if I said that Jewish people, I thought Jewish people didn't like showers? I was like, because during the Holocaust, Hitler, brought them in and told them that they were taking showers and poured acid on all of them. Would that be funny? And he was like, I never thought of it like that. I sincerely apologize. But it took me making that reference for him to understand or even view that that was a sick joke that he just made about slavery and throwing over a boat. And that's where it comes with my thought that no, it's like this will make you see that is inappropriate, that this is a tragedy. But you seeing this is like something you can joke about. It's something they can look at the images and the things that you post and not even be affected by it. They could just flip through and not truly be hurt and devastated the way they should be if they see that 100 Palestinians were just killed over the weekend or something like that. But they could just flip through it, and that's the part that is.
And I no, you're right. I think it's very powerful. Like one thing I did, because it was like an intersecting crisis or conflict, was I'd always compare what was happening in Ukraine and sort of like, expose the fact that Western media outlets, celebrities, politicians were rousing about how the Ukrainians were being genocided and were being lauded. Not only were they being genocided, they said, they were being lauded as freedom fighters. They were being lauded as heroes. They were doing the exact same things that Palestinians were doing, launching Molotov cocktails. I'm a huge boxing fan. A lot of my favorite boxers, like Lomachenko, the Klitschko brothers, were on the front lines. These guys were being lionized. You know what I mean? But Palestinians were doing the exact same thing, and I would call it out. And like you said, Etan, it really had a powerful and productive effect on people making that comparison. Something that happened a couple of days ago that I thought was really that really speaks to your point. Do you guys know this musician Lana Del Rey?
Sure.
Yeah. So she put a post that got considerable traction and went viral about the floods taking place in Texas, and people in the comments were calling her out for not speaking out on Gaza. And she finally made a statement. So I think comparisons can be powerful, especially if they're contemporaneous and converging with what's happening in the now. Historical comparisons, I think they do generate a lot of productive value, but they also invite some perils as well with regard to comparison. Something that the left often does, which I find really toxic and destructive, which is this whole like oppression Olympics thing, which can be more divisive. But there are ways to do it, Etan, and I think you raised an example of a powerful way that you've done it.
Yeah, I'll just say that, and you remarked on this, Khaled, with your comments about the history of animalization and the language of extermination, is that sometimes when we go to Hitler, it also makes it sound like that Hitler is foundational to this process, and people are aping Hitler. Yeah. I try to, when Hitler comes up in the conversation or is worthy of a comparison, to point out that very important book about how Hitler's American model, about how much of what we understand as Nazism, what we understand as apartheid, what was studied in the American South. Mm-hmm. So people understand, like, we are not different. There is nothing in the Germanic character that led them to commit this Holocaust. There's nothing in the Jewish character that made them the perfect victims of a Holocaust. This is a human process brought out by oppression and class society. It's the worst ending to the politics of division and the politics of multiculturalism is genocide. Khaled, you're a law professor. This is your world. There is a legalistic wing responding to the movement of the attack on Palestinian students, the attack on pro-Palestine students, the attack on immigrant students, migrant students who are speaking out for Palestine against genocide. There are legal things in the criminal courts. There are legal things people are trying to do to hold Netanyahu to account. What do you think? How useful a road and how effective a road? And is it important for people? Because I know a lot of y'all who do this work, it's like nickels and dimes. Is it important for people to support, you think, in the movement?